Good morning, everybody from New Zealand. It's 7 a.m. here. It's 7 p.m. where our guest is from, Becky. And in between, it's all the other times. So we hope that you can hear us, and we hope that you're able to, if you're not on the live stream, which we appreciate you all being here, we'll be able to watch it a little bit later. And how are you this morning, Becky?
I am fabulous. Thank you.
That's
yeah. How
good.
are you?
I'm pretty good. And congratulations for last weekend.
Oh, thank you so much.
How many years has it been?
33. Yeah. So obviously, you know, I got married when I was like about 12. Yeah.
Oh, great. I don't think I was 12 when I got married, but anyway.
Yeah. So, yeah, 33 years. So, and yeah, 7 of those outside of JWs as well. So, oh my goodness, our marriage has survived, people. Yeah.
How did you do that?
I know, without that threefold cord, we should have fallen apart, shouldn't we?
That's right, you should have.
Oh, dear.
Well, it's very nice to have you on today, and we can share your example to see what we can learn.
Thank you so
that those ones who are coming in, and just to let everybody know, in the recent weeks, the majority that have joined in our group have very few to no connections with the XJW community. So we've got a lot of new ones coming into the group at the moment, which is really nice to see, that we can be there and support them, and you know, they can ask questions. Linda's saying hello.
Hi, Linda.
And she just put up a little...
I don't know what that is.
Looks like a party hat, is it?
I don't know.
Is that a party hat, Linda?
Could be. But it looks like it's something happy, so that's cool.
She's definitely happy, so that's good.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's find out a little bit about you that you'd like to share with us, and just a little bit of your history. And folks, if anything is said here and you struggle with it, please reach out to somebody you feel you can trust, somebody who can help you through it. We are here to do that. And you just never know. Some things might upset you, and that's okay. But remember, please reach out to get support. Okay, Linda, go for it. We look forward to hearing all about the things you want to tell us.
So, so some things might be triggering, and as you say, you know, reach out. So my parents were JWs. I was born in JW. My parents were assigned a congregation to sort out some issues that were going on in that congregation. So they were asked by Bethel, my father particularly, obviously, to go in and help sort out this congregation. So, for example, there was an elderly sister that would play the piano for the music, for the songs, and then when she'd finished, she'd light up a cigarette, for example. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. There'd be sometimes you'd have a sister who would stand and when she would give her talk, she wouldn't have a householder. She would stand at the rostrum and use a stick to point to the blackboard and stuff like that. There's lots of things, but I'd had to go in and sort out. So that kind of meant that my upbringing within that congregation was difficult, because there were some people that were very pleased to see my parents sorting things out, but there were those that weren't very happy. And it also meant that my upbringing, I had to be squeaky clean, or, you know, I wasn't allowed to be a child, because we had to be a brilliant example, because otherwise anything I did would be used against my father. So from that aspect, it was quite difficult. I can remember my father being on the platform, and people at the back would be booing or slow clapping him. Yeah.
Has that just happened in England or?
This was on the border of England and Wales. Yeah, it was just so that was quite interesting, really. I would say my upbringing was cult-like. I had very, very strong characters as parents, and I wasn't allowed to make mistakes. I wasn't allowed to breathe. Punishment was severe. I now know that it was abusive, the punishments. And the schools that I went to were religious schools with vicars who used to like to try and get me into religious assembly when I was very, very small. And, obviously I wouldn't go in. So I can remember when I was 6 being dragged by the vicar by my hair and shut in a broom cupboard from 9 o'clock in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. With, it was locked. There was just a chair in there, being desperate for the toilet, nowhere to go. It was dark. That was some of the stuff that I experienced even within school, because I didn't like Jehovah's Witnesses. And then I was sexually abused by a JW from the age of 3 to 12. And so I learned at a very young age that actually adults aren't to be trusted. There is nowhere to go. I couldn't sort of tell my parents. A lot of the abuse happened within the Kingdom Hall, so I couldn't tell anyone within the Kingdom Hall either. And I couldn't go to anyone at school because, I was already experiencing various forms of abuse even at school. And of course, as a JW, you are taught that you can't rely on the world. The police are going to be used by Satan to persecute us, come Armageddon, and everyone's in the hands of Satan at the end of the day. So that's a very small glimpse of the kind of upbringing that I had, really. It was not easy at all. And so I would say I was about 7 when I started self-harming as a way of coping to what was going on, because there was just nowhere around me that I could go. I mean, for example, I remember being 9 or so and coming home from a meeting, from an assembly actually, and my parents would discuss the assembly. What did I think of this particular item? And I can remember saying I didn't think it was very good. What was very good about it? I don't think it was very good that everybody clapped. I would have been about 9. I don't think it's very good that everybody clapped when this lady said that, she came back to Jehovah after being disfellowshipped. She came back because she missed her family. And my parents were quite annoyed with me. Well, what do you mean? Well, that's wrong, isn't it? She should have come back for Jehovah, not because she missed her family. And the beating that I got for that was horrendous. So
was your dad in the army or something?
Sorry?
Anytime? Was your dad ever in the army?
Oh, well, he should have been. Yeah, I mean, I know my mum had a very difficult upbringing by her JW parents. They were very sort of violent and abusive. I knew they loved me. My parents ended up being on the circuit. It was expected that I would be a regular pioneer. Yeah. I wanted to be a midwife, but that wasn't happening. It was expected that everybody in the family regular pioneered, all the generations, grandparents as well. So it was the family business to regular pioneer. And that was just, expected that would happen to me as well. So it was very interesting and not an easy upbringing, because there was nowhere for me, nowhere at all. I found out that the person that was abusing me 4 times a week also abused 6 others as well. But obviously, you know, you're taught that you can't say anything about it, can't talk to anyone about it, because, you know, it's your fault, and, you know, Jehovah already hates you, so you can't talk about it. So it's interesting to find out later that, you know, when I finally took him to court a few years ago, that there were 6 others as well that he was abusing. But you know, you struggle with that as a child, because you listen to the meetings and you realise that, you know, it's drummed into you that Jehovah does listen to prayers. But you have to work in harmony with them. So as a small child, I can remember thinking, but I'm working very hard and I'm praying to Jehovah to make this man stop. So I must be really bad because he's not answering my prayers. And I think that's one of the really difficult things I have with a lot of religion, in a way, is that it does put people in their primitive brain, you know, because you know, it makes you feel like you're a sinner, or you're not good enough, or what have you. And I think sometimes religion can do a lot of damage to people's self-esteem, to be fair. So that was kind of my upbringing, and I felt that if I was the best working pioneer that I could ever be, study really, really hard, then it would stop. You know, it would stop, and I would be good enough for it to stop. But obviously, I realise now that that's not the case. And then when I was 12, and I can remember my father, very strict, you know, Bible studies with my dad. And I can remember him saying, you know, how Jehovah's in charge of the congregation, Jesus is in charge of the congregation, and the Holy Spirit, and blah 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 blah, and nobody's made nobody's put into authority without Jehovah and Jesus and the Holy Spirit being well aware of what's going on. And this particular brother, the paedophile, became a ministerial servant.
Yep.
And that was the start for me. I would have been about 12. That was the start for me, where I thought, there's something wrong here. You know, there must be something wrong. But of course, you think that you are an exception to the rule. And of course, I now know, because I've worked with IGSA, being core participant with IGSA, and also with the Truth Project, which is very similar to the Australian Royal Commission. I realise now that that's not the case at all. And in fact, Jehovah's Witnesses are worse than the Catholic Church, to be fair. So, yeah, you know, it all starts to fit when you get older and you look back. You start to realise, actually, it's got nothing to do with you. You know, it wasn't your fault at all. You were a child and you should have been protected. But that would have been the starting of unravelling, I think. But then I just sort of put it in a box for a little while and ended up getting married to a ministerial servant and having children within the organisation while my parents were in the circuit. And then we had I'm not sure if it was in a wake or a watchtower. I think it was in a wake, and it was roughly about the April time of 99. And it listed in there, there was a quote in there about if you see, you know, child abuse going on within the religion that you were a part of, I can't remember how it phrased it now, but it was something like that, then you really need to look at whether God's in your religion.
Yeah, I remember that one.
obviously they were pointing to the Catholic Church and everything that was going on there. But that was like a hit in the face to me. I thought that was the most hypocritical thing, and that started my unraveling of everything. But I was also aware that my husband was an elder and my parents were on the circuit, and so I was doing research basically privately, so that you couldn't trace me on the family computer, and while he was at work, and quite nervous that he should find out what I was doing because of the ramifications. Because my husband was being used at district conventions, keynote addresses and things like that. He was a very good speaker, a really good teacher, so he was used a lot and known. And I was known as being a CEO's daughter. So can you imagine? My husband would have taken advice from my parents, no questions, if he'd have found out what I was doing. So that was quite hard from then on, really. Trying to drop some things in with my husband, to try and get him to think. And of course, in 2013, the article about the wheat and the weeds and all that, and the faithful and discreet slave and all that rubbish that came out in 2013, was the unraveling for my husband, and we were able to come out together, which was
Very
amazing.
nice.
But I took my abuser to court knowing that would probably damage my relationship with my family, which it did. I have a huge JW family, and they don't have anything to do with me. My father didn't want anything to do with it. It took my CID officer, to say, your daughter needs her father, not an elder, right now. You don't know the extent of the sexual abuse that she went under on your watch, that you didn't report to the police because you took the society's line on that. You should be a father to her. And he was for about a day. And then he went back home and did more JW conditioning, and I didn't hear from him for a little while. So he didn't see the point of me taking him to prison, even though he was in a congregation where the elders had not told the families that there was a paedophile there, because he'd gone to court before, two other girls before me. The elders in that congregation had not warned any of the family that there was a sex offender within that congregation. And so that was another motivating factor for me to make sure that he went to prison. And leaving and doing that also cost me both my children, although my youngest has come out of the organisation, so I've got him back.
Nice.
But it's cost me my oldest son.
For the moment.
Yeah.
We just had a question coming from Linda. When did you realise that the cult's damage to you had impacted your childhood?
But you realise that pretty much, you realise that as a child.
Everybody's different, though. I never realised it.
I think you do, to be honest. You when you sort of, I think when you go to other people's houses, you realise there's something a little bit wrong with yours, or there's something a little bit wrong with them. Do you know what I mean? When you go to people's houses as a child.
No, I never. I sat and thought about it, and I never ever. I just thought it was normal.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it was the fact that when you start to heal yourself. I mean, I didn't have therapy or anything for, up until a couple of years ago, really. You do research and and you realise. But I think it's important to understand that so much emphasis can be put on, and I meet people, and obviously in my job that I do now, oh, I'm an anxious person. No, you're not. You know, and people will describe themselves in those terms, and I think it's really important. I made a conscious effort not to do that. It's important not to do that. I'm not an anxious person. I might choose to be, but I'm not an anxious person. That doesn't define me. Oh, you know, I'm a survivor. I'm a thriver. You know, I've experienced trauma. That doesn't define who you are. It's something we've experienced, absolutely, but it doesn't define us. You know, we don't introduce ourselves as saying, oh, I've got diabetes. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that, yes, this has been a part of what's happened to me, and I'm using that to try and help others, but it doesn't define who I am. I'm not, you know, I'm in the car and I'm looking out of my windscreen. I am not looking out of my rearview mirror. I'm looking out of my windscreen because this is where I am now. So I don't, as a therapist, I do not delve into people's past, and I don't delve into my past either, if that makes sense, because it's not where I'm going.
Yeah.
So it, you know, it's up to us now to move forward, and I'm not in the position of saying it's wrecked my life or it wrecked my childhood. It was a difficult childhood, yes, but it's taught me a lot of things, and those things I can use to my advantage now. If that makes sense. And I think that's a really important thing when we have experienced difficulties, when we have experienced trauma. And yes, you know, there are things that I realise it's affected me on that, and you know, somebody with a normal childhood wouldn't experience. Or I do have some hang-ups, you know, that I have to work really hard to try and not have those. But I don't allow those to define who I am. So I think, yeah, the more I sort of worked in mental health, the more you sort of realise that, yes, okay, it was a damaging childhood, but actually so many people have had very similar experiences.
Very true. So just going one step back a little bit for the moment. So 2013, you said that was the unraveling?
Yeah.
So when did you stop regular pioneering?
When did I stop?
Yeah. Sorry, Karen.
So I regular pioneered straight from school, and I stopped when my first child was about, I think he was about 18 months old. Okay. And that was due to health reasons, because I was very ill. Yeah.
Okay. So 2013 came along. You found I wasn't in there, with all the bits and pieces about the weed and whatnot. What steps did you take from that point on? You briefly touched on it about the researching.
How do you mean? So I did, what steps did I take?
Yeah, so when your hubby was, because he had a watchtower study that he couldn't really explain, could he?
That's right. So he was the watchtower study conductor. He had a watchtower study article that he couldn't explain, which was this wheat in the weeds and the timeline. Do you remember that one with the most ridiculous timeline ever in the world? It was just, I don't know if you were in there.
Yeah, I wasn't in. I'd long gone. I heard about it later.
Oh, honestly, it was awful. So he went to my dad to say, you know, what do I do with this? Because I can't teach this. It's not even scriptural, biblical. I mean, you'll have to ask him that story and he'll fill you in. And my dad was basically sort of, well, you know what, I've got all of these things here as well, you know. So you're not on your own having these doubts and stuff, but just get up there and do your best. was kind of the motto. And he came out with a lot of things that, not even we thought of.
And that came from a CO.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, in all honesty, it's surprising. My husband and I were having this conversation today. It's surprising the amount of JWs that are in, but didn't understand some of the doctrine, but were still in anyway.
Yeah.
Still in anyway, and I just don't understand that at all. I don't, because it makes them feel nice, or it's cozy, or wouldn't it be lovely, or there isn't anything else out there, so I'm going to tag along with this. Yeah, quite interesting, really. But it was something that was, really important to us. It was, for me, it was the last straw.
Yep.
For my husband, it was the unraveling. Yeah. So then we tried to open our kids' eyes subtly, and then we realised that no, I just can't go in there anymore. Being in there was almost like being put into a vacuum. Being in the Kingdom Hall, I felt like all the life and the blood and the air was being sucked out of me, and I was just sort of having panic attacks just walking into the Kingdom Hall, because I just wanted to scream at what was being said from the platform. So I left very abruptly with my husband.
You mean this guy here?
We just, we just said we're not going anymore.
Yep.
And that's the way to do it, because they can't do anything. They can try to look for grounds for disfellowshipping, but they find it very difficult to find any. So you don't answer any calls, you don't allow them to your home, and you don't let them in because you're not recognising their authority. So it's very difficult for them to find grounds. And we felt that was incredibly important because of the fact that our kids were still living at home, and my father was now a special pioneer and living near me, but my mum had recently died. So that way, I could still tend to his needs without him having a conflict of conscience, the fact that he was talking to somebody who was disfellowshipped. So we never said anything apostate, we never did anything to create any reason for them to disfellowship us. We just were there, one meeting answering up, and then the next meeting we weren't. And that's the way we did it. And it was a huge, huge relief to me. But I have to say, I think it's really important when somebody does come out to spend time getting to know yourself. Because when you're in a high control religion, everything is dictated to you, how you feel about things. And it was interesting that I was having this conversation with my husband and my son the other day. Being out somewhere, and say, for example, somebody's given you the wrong change, or they've given you too much money, or they haven't charged you for something. What are you going to do in that situation? Now, as a JW, it's a fabulous opportunity for me to say, you haven't charged me for this, and I've done this, and I've pointed it out to you. To find grounds, and we felt that was incredibly important because of the fact that our kids were still living at home, and my father was now a special pioneer and living near me, but my mum had recently died. So that way, I could still tend to his needs without him having a conflict of conscience, the fact that he was talking to somebody who was disfellowshipped. So we never said anything apostate, we never did anything to create any reason for them to disfellowship us. We just were there, one meeting answering up, and then the next meeting we weren't. And that's the way we did it. And it was a huge, huge relief to me. But I have to say, I think it's really important when somebody does come out to spend time getting to know yourself. Because when you're in a high control religion, everything is dictated to you, how you feel about things. And it was interesting that I was having this conversation with my husband and my son the other day. Being out somewhere, and say, for example, somebody's given you the wrong change, or they've given you too much money, or they haven't charged you for something. What are you going to do in that situation? Now, as a JW, oh, it's a fabulous opportunity for me to say, oh, you haven't charged me for this, and I've done this, and I've pointed it out to you because, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. So what are you now actually going to do? Especially if you've come out and you think, well, actually, I don't believe there's a God at all because he's never done anything for me. So what are you actually going to do? And you realise that actually I've got to say something because that's who I am.
Yeah.
And that's quite an interesting experience, I think, when you come out and you start. I've been having, because my son hasn't been out for very long. And I think it's important. Well, what kind of music do I like listening to? You're in your 40s, asking yourself, what kind of music do I actually really like listening to? Or even looking at items, clothing-wise even, that you perhaps wouldn't consider wearing before and asking yourself, can you wear this now? So I think it's important that we spend time getting to know ourselves when we've left, what we really like and how we really feel. And if you've got some really good friends that have got diverse opinions that have never been JWs, absolutely invite them around and have some really brilliant discussions, because it's a great way to learn about other people's feelings. We talk when we're in the organisation about, theocratic language and stuff.
Yep.
We have this whole, well, actually, there's a whole new language we need to kind of learn when we come out.
Yes.
And actually, as well, another thing that is so fascinating is that you can have an opinion and the other person can have an opinion and there's going to be no police called. And you can still be friends. I mean, that's a revelation in itself, isn't it, when you leave?
Absolutely. So when both you and Duncan came out, I noticed Duncan's just made a comment there with not fading. Who did you have that you've just given some very practical advice? Who did you have around you at the time to help you open your eyes?
We had a few non-JW friends, and I think that's quite important to have. I mean, I did get the elders commenting on it, but I did have some neighbours, and I did have some friends, and I have some close friends that were non-JWs, and I think that is important. It's not vital because we all know that we can move to a new area in a new job. And we can make friends and we can make a new life. So we know we can do it. But it is helpful to have those friends beforehand. With us, our youngest son, he had friends that weren't JWs and we encouraged that. And we, that was a huge thing for him. It made it much easier for him to leave, to have that little buffer of people there. So I think, if you're going to leave, then try and get some friends.
Mm-hmm.
Make some friends with colleagues or neighbours even. And I think COVID is a great icebreaker for that sort of thing. If you've had a friend and you haven't been in touch with them, it's a great, hey, just thinking of you with COVID going on, checking you're okay. That breaks the ice if you haven't been in touch with somebody for some time, I think. So use that as a way of getting back in touch with people. So we had those friends. Duncan had a work colleague who was ex-Mormon, so they're quite similar in beliefs, and so they would very often have lunchtime walks where they'd sort of compare notes and stuff. And I think Duncan found that helpful. I think it's helpful for men to have friends like that as well. People who get it. Yeah. And just getting out there, accepting invitations, inviting people around, just Get yourself known. And it's an effort, and yes, it's nerve-wracking. I have to say, I live in a little village, and we were always invited to the Christmas party by a neighbour, and we always used to have to say no. And she heard that we'd left, and she was so excited, came round, invited us, and I said to her, I'd love to come, but I'm very conscious of the fact that I've always said no. And, you'd be quite within your rights to turn around and say, clear off. We weren't good enough for you then, Susan. Why should we be good enough for you now? And no, she wasn't like that at all. They were all delighted, and most of the village were at this party. And it was amazing. It was absolutely 100% complete contrast to JWs, because they were there accepting of us now. They accepted us when we were JWs, and they're accepting us now as non-JWs and still welcoming us to their party. And that was a very, very moving experience for us, actually. That the world is not a scary place, and the majority of people are actually really kind and helpful, and nice. We did have a few funny experiences there where there was a couple of guys that were like, so have you just moved into the village then? Because we haven't seen you around. No. When did you move in? 99. What? You've been here longer than us. How come you and Duncan just decided he was just going to come out with it, and this was how to kill a conversation in seconds. He turned around and said, well, we just live down there, but we've been in a really high control religion. We've been in a cult and we've just escaped. And this guy with his drink was like, cheers, mate. Cheers to that one, mate. And Scott. Where do you go from there? Oh dear.
Okay, so both you and Duncan are very outgoing. What about those ones, putting your therapist hat on, or your personal hat, whichever hat you want to wear, when those ones who do come out and they are a little bit shy, what practical things could you encourage them to do so they can build up to the stage where they don't feel nervous, don't feel too shy, to be able to find the friends?
Who can they start with? I mean, can you start with your neighbours? So I've got a client, for example, incredibly shy. So what they have done is they've looked for opportunities to go and get something from their car when their neighbour's out, just so that they can say hello. Hi, how are you? Sorry, I don't talk very much. I'm actually quite shy. I'm not being aloof. I'm just quite a shy individual. I find this kind of thing really hard. So I just want to make an effort and say hello and get to know one of my neighbours. And the neighbour's gone, oh, great stuff, blah, 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 blah. Should we meet for a coffee one day? Should we lean over the fence and have a coffee? It started like that. Sometimes Facebook groups within your local community. So in the village, you can find out some things that go on, and you might be able to chat on there. That breaks the ice. Finding out what community stuff's going on locally, so that you can go and join that. Sometimes there'll be, for example, in our village, there'll be, come springtime, we need some help in the churchyard to mow and weed and do some bits and pieces. Going to something like that would break the ice, because everybody else is involved in doing something. So seeing if there's any local groups, and just making an effort, a bit more of an effort to be friendly. And it takes a deep breath to do it, but actually you realise it's not as bad as you think. Having some things in mind that you can talk about as well, that always helps. And if you've got work colleagues as well, I've had a client where they decided they would talk to one new person each day.
Great idea.
at work and just stop at their desk. And to make it easier, they had a massive, great big box of biscuits. And so they would go, when it was break time, they would go and that would be their introduction. I've got a packet of biscuits. You and I haven't chatted. Fancy a biscuit? You know, what exactly is it, you're actually doing? Because they work in rather a large office.
Yeah.
And that broke the ice as well. So they've got a few more people. And then once you've done it a few times, talking to brand new people, breaking the ice, realizing that actually we all pretty much feel the same way. If it was really easy for everybody, then doctors' waiting rooms would be noisy, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Does that mean it could be good to ask for help at the start if one is really shy?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
What could they ask? The first question that a person who's really shy, what could they ask first?
That's a good question. I think just being honest about how you're actually feeling, but you're trying to make an effort.
Okay.
I mean, and how would you feel if you had a new neighbour and they came up to you and said, I want to say hello, my conversation might be a bit stilted because I'm really shy?
What would I say? I'd say welcome.
Yeah.
Or something.
Would you
shake their hand?
Would you be freaked out and think, oh my goodness, keep away from me, you weirdo?
No, I wouldn't. I have to go into houses doing my job. So, no, you just sort of... But I'm not like everyone. You're not like everyone. So we just go and do things. Say hello and do it. But a lot aren't like that. They just...
No, they're not. No,
and it's a real shame.
It is. Because you can come over as being aloof. And people are put off.
Yeah.
Because they think you're standoffish. So that's why I say sometimes it might be helpful to say, hi, sorry, I haven't spoken before. I'm just a little bit shy. Then people realize, oh, he's not standoffish. She's not standoffish. They're shy. And actually they realize that that's taken a lot of courage for you to come and say that in the first place. So they'll put more of an effort in, actually, to meet you halfway, to make it easier for you.
Yeah. Well, you've done a lot of changes in your life. What are you doing now?
What am I doing now? I now have, right in the middle of COVID, because obviously this is the best time to do it. I've set up a business.
Oh, great timing.
I know. Exactly. When did you set your business up? Right in the middle of COVID. So from parents that thought that it would be wrong for me to do exams or anything else, or I wouldn't be capable of doing them. I think telling me that I wouldn't be capable of doing them was the deterrent for me even trying, because then I won't get involved in the world. Thinking about it now, actually. But I used to genuinely believe that, them telling me that I couldn't do exams was because I wasn't clever enough. So I'm now a psychotherapist and clinical hypnotherapist. So I have worked in a big university teaching hospital with psychiatry liaison, setting up a role there. My role was I saw people that came into A&E that had tried to take their own life. So various forms of self-harm, from cutting through to trying to end their life. And I was perfectly placed for that because, that was my expertise. That was something I'd done myself, tried to do myself, and I'd had the training to deal with that and be a message of hope to others. Yes, I've been where you are. And then I would liaise between their needs and psychiatrists and get their point across to the psychiatrist. So the psychiatrist tends to do things by the book, has no experience really of what it's like to have a mental health challenge. And my role was to tell him, and sometimes it would be in no uncertain terms, tell him and explain to him. That was my role. But I would signpost, so I never really got to see the end story for these patients. So I decided to take my training further. And yeah, I qualified this year.
Nice.
I have nearly 1,000 clinical hours now. And yeah, I've just set up my new consulting rooms. So I'm trying to use my experience, not just with EGSA, to try and help them to understand how Jehovah's Witnesses work and the two-witness rule and why we need mandatory reporting within the UK, and safeguarding in place, but also using that experience with clients as well. And I think they find that really helpful, because a lot of therapists don't have that experience. They just have the training, not the personal experience.
Yeah.
So again, it's just looking where you are in life and asking yourself, where do you want to be? Where do I actually want to be? And then taking those steps to get there. Because it's possible to do that. I can do it. Literally anyone can do it. And you know, it's when our life is not fixed at all. We might not have had the best start or the best environment, but you know, we can uproot ourselves, just plant ourselves somewhere else, and we really can achieve what we want to achieve and move on from you know, the chains of the organization. But it's hard work. And I think when you realise, you know, if you move your kitchen around and you move your fridge, how long does it take you to stop going to the old place where your fridge was? Do you know what I mean? So we've got these old habits from the organisation, and it's not going to just go, and we can't expect it to just go. But I do get frustrated sometimes when I listen to people and they're not training themselves out of it.
Yeah.
You just think that, well, I've left, and no, you've got to train yourself out of it, and you've got to build new neurons within your brain, and the old ones will go. So I think it's really important to do that.
So just on that, what would be a good first step? Because you notice sometimes if somebody posts in one of the groups a thing that's even remotely linked to a Kingdom Melody song, you see the reaction. So that's something that's only very small in a lot of ways, big in other ways.
Yeah.
What's a very simple step to do what you've just suggested to help us train ourselves out of where we have been to move on?
I think it's important to focus on the positive, because I know that sounds a bit cliche, but when you think about the organisation, they don't focus on the positive at all.
No, they don't.
Very much primitive brain stuff. I mean, when I see clients, I explain the different parts of the brain. And by primitive brain, I mean amygdala, which is our fight, flight, depression, freeze response part of our brain. And I would say most of the JW teachings put us into that part of our brain. And that's not a great way to live. It's a depressing way to live. We really need to get a good life. We really need to be in our prefrontal cortex, our intelligent part of our brain, because from this part of our brain, we always make the right choices in life. We come up with solutions to our problems because we're in this part of our brain. And the way to get into this part of our brain is really by focusing in on the positives in life and not focusing on the negative. The negative, every single negative thought that we have gets converted into anxiety. And so that creates that Well, we're anxious, we're going to be more negative, and we're just living in that part of our brain. We can't think about the future, we're just dwelling on the past, because that primitive part of our brain likes to relive things, and it will constantly play them. It will constantly beat us up for those past mistakes. That's what it likes to do. And it only ever operates from previous patterns of behavior.
Yep.
It's not an intelligent part of our brain. You can't think of anything new. So what worked yesterday, it will make you do the same thing again, because that's what's kept you alive. So to really be able to move forward and leave the chains of the JWs behind, we need to be working from this part of our brain. And one of the ways of doing that is really focusing on the positive aspects of life. So I would say start with writing down every single day when you go to bed, because that will help you to get into your prefrontal cortex. Write down all the positive interactions that you've had during the day. And if you're not having many, find them, make them happen. There's a client of mine who lives on his own. During lockdown, he was still able to have his food delivered. So he lived in a city where they were still delivering food. You know, like Deliveroo. I don't know if you have Deliveroo, but, you know, you can ring a restaurant up and then they get this courier to bring the food. He would have a conversation with the delivery driver. He would make time to have that conversation. So he would look for those positive interactions, positive action each day. Now, it might be, I've got a pile of ironing over there. I'm just not motivated to do it. Just do it. What's going to make it better for you? Putting the radio on, having the TV on, putting your favourite programme on, you know, having your favourite cup of coffee by your side. Do it. Because once you've started doing it, what happens is you start releasing chemicals within the brain that motivate you to do more of the same. So that positive thinking, those positive actions and positive interactions. And if you start doing that every single day, then you start to realise that you're getting to know yourself quite well. There's actually quite a lot of positive things happening within your day and within your life. And you start to see what possible future you could have for yourself as well. And then you start releasing serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline. All of those things are really good chemicals for helping us choose the right way for us to go. And we start to get to know ourselves as well, because our subconscious brain knows who we really are. But when you're in a cult, that has to be squished.
Yeah, it does.
So it gives you that opportunity as well of really getting to know who you are and what you like. And you know, I've had people say to me, "Nothing good happens. Nothing good happens. Oh, I can't write anything good down because there's just nothing good that happens to me at all." And I had a client take me through her day, and it turned out that it was actually my husband makes a cup of tea and brings it up in the morning. That's one of your good things. Why isn't it down there, honey? He makes the lunch every single day for him and her to go to work. She has to cook because he can't cook. But he clears up. He washes up and dries up and puts away. Those are 3 great, fantastic things. You know, maybe somebody held the door open for you. You know, maybe you got a text from somebody. There's lots of things that we can, you know, focus on. And I'd say I'd start there.
Cool. Somebody you know very well made this comment.
Oh, yeah. Yes. That's why I married Duncan, because it was the best sense of humour thing I could think of.
Is Duncan there to reply to that one?
Yeah, he's there to reply to that one. And yeah, I mean, basically, I was never going to get married, and we were just the only 2 left.
Oh.
No, I think the humour is just the best. And I think you have to laugh at yourself. You have to laugh. I know people. I've spoken to people. Go, I'm so bitter about all the years I've wasted. No, just move on from it. Because otherwise, being bitter about those years, it's wasting your life now and you're not even in it. You've got to move on and have some humor about it.
We know the reason why somebody married you.
Yes, a challenge. Absolutely. I was the challenge he needed. Yeah. And actually, when guys found out who my father was, because he was on the circuit, they would run a mile. So he was the only one who was prepared to go on the spit roast and be, yeah. But humour is just the best thing. It really, really is. And I think as well, have some funny videos. Have some funny videos on your phone that when you're feeling a little bit down, a little bit blue, or you've been triggered by something you've seen on the news, or you're triggered by somebody else's experience within the JWs, I think have something that always makes you laugh, because it will just bring you out your primitive mind and back into your prefrontal cortex, where you can start to think more logically, and move forward. Yeah, behind every man is a great woman. Well, of course. Yeah. Learning from your past, but don't concentrate on the negative. Absolutely. We mustn't concentrate on the negative. We must concentrate on the positive, because negative doesn't get us anywhere. The primitive brain always does things like, I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to have a baby. I'm never going to have a happy life. That's what the primitive brain does. Because it's really, it's a fantastic brain in that it's been designed for our survival, but it's really been designed for an emergency situation, like opening your front door and finding a polar bear there. That's what it's been designed for. It cuts off your prefrontal cortex straight away, puts you straight into survival mode, where it recognizes you need to run back into your front door, and it will raise your heart rate. It will make you breathe more quickly, because it recognizes that you need extra blood and extra oxygen to your legs to run. All the symptoms of a panic attack. You're hot, you're sweaty, you're breathing, you're gasping. Makes you run, close your front door. Fantastic. You've survived the polar bear. But unfortunately, what's happening is we've got that same response in modern day life to, say, a bill or the phone ringing, or whatever else it might be. So by doing those positive things, you're kind of just trying to move away from your panic button, and you're just dampening down your amygdala a little bit, and giving your logical brain that chance to help you to flourish, really, and move away from the negative. And I think sometimes that can be, I did leave one JW, ex-JW group, because it was just doing my head in. There's such a lot of negativity going on, and it's not helpful, really.
No, really. We've got to look after ourselves on that front.
Yeah. Yeah, you have. And I think we can all help each other as well. So, and that's what I like about, this group, is that we can do that, and we are focused in on the positive, aren't we? So,
well, that's the goal.
Yeah.
So how's your business going anyway?
Oh, it's going really well. I'm getting some new clients, which is fantastic. And I'm really, really enjoying it.
That's obviously a big adventure for you.
It's a huge adventure.
You got any other adventures planned for you and Duncan, and hopefully your oldest as well as your youngest?
Actually, we are thinking of doing a trip to New Zealand. We don't know when, but we are thinking of doing. We've got some friends dotted around, and there's also a guy called Shane, weird guy. But yeah, we'll want to call on him as well, and just ruin his day when we call.
It won't be a ruin. I'll look forward to that. It's just that we've got to try and, if you come at the moment, well, you can't come.
No.
Unless you're from Australia, but you've still got to go into quarantine for 2 weeks.
Exactly.
So it's something to put in the mix. $3,000 per person.
Wow.
So, I would wait just a little bit, but we'd love to see you when you get here.
Yeah, we are definitely waiting until COVID's over. We've got friends in Australia, so we've done Australia. Duncan's done New Zealand because he used to have to go for work every year. So he's done the universities that he used to visit, the universities of Australia and New Zealand would host sort of like the user conferences, and so he's been to New Zealand and different parts of Australia over the years. So I've done Australia, but I haven't managed to get over to New Zealand yet. So that would
One
be
day.
my next adventure.
Cool.
Yeah, that would be really exciting to do. But I think it's important that we realise that that the JW life is a chapter that's finished. It's done, dusted, and we're here to help others at the beginning of their journey. But we don't want to be dwelling on it, do we?
No, definitely not.
We've got new
Right.
chapters to write.
Auckland Uni and AUT. So he hasn't been outside of Auckland. That's not New Zealand.
Ah, has he not? Have you not, Duncan? You lied to me.
He's only been in a little speck. Okay, admittedly, that speck is the biggest city in the country.
I think he's driven around a little bit of New Zealand, but
okay.
Because he's been to visit people in New Zealand. But yeah, I think he had one of the most amazing welcomes, as well as Canterbury.
Yeah, well, that's the South Island. That's a bit more New Zealand.
Okay. Oh, you've got to change the approval a little bit more now, Duncan. Well done.
And Wellington. Now, we're only about an hour and 3/4 from Wellington, Palmerston North.
Oh, okay.
But we do have a university. Well, I don't know what's going to happen now because a lot of them are all going online.
Yeah.
So a lot of the buildings are already empty.
Right. So have all the students gone home?
Yeah, a lot of them doing homeschool at the moment.
Yeah.
Because of COVID, and they're not going back till next year, possibly. They might stay a lot on the. They told me North Island is only
held on by a chain.
Yeah. To where, Duncan?
We could cut it loose at any time we like. Oh dear.
Well, I know Linda lived up way past, or not way past, but past Auckland, so she's got a New Zealand connection.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so that would be fantastic to do that. Hopefully, when COVID's lifted, and we've got some friends who've got a motorhome in New Zealand, so they have so kindly said that we can borrow their motorhome and do like a little tour. So I can't wait to do that. So yeah, I think I need to just build up a few more clients and save a few of the pennies. Yeah.
Yep. Well, when you come over, we have a number of areas where we have meetup groups.
Oh, fantastic!
We've got them in Auckland, and we've got a meetup coming there. In about 12 days' time, the last day of the month, we've got a meetup going there. Tauranga, which is further down the island, Wellington, Christchurch, and right down, well, not quite right down the bottom, but down in Dunedin. So meetups coming up there. So if anybody in New Zealand wants to go to a meetup and they're going to watch this at a later stage, we do have meetups. And just a bit of a shout out to the group. When COVID restrictions behave themselves, if you do have a meetup planned, please put it in the group. It's something that there's a place for someone to move on, and that's great because that's what we want to see everybody doing, moving on.
Yeah.
But it helps a lot of people to realise they're not by themselves. It might be scary to walk up to a meetup because in our head, for the first time, we're thinking these are former Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes.
It's not like that. You'll be welcomed. You really, really will.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same goes in the UK when we've had meetups. I remember going to my first one and being, nervous about it. And it's not like walking into a Kingdom Hall where people stare at you and as if you've got a horn growing out of your head or something. And I have walked into some Kingdom Halls that are a little bit like that. It really isn't, and everybody has had to walk there for the first time, so they all know when a new person's there for the first time, and they put themselves out. I've been to a few within the UK, and I think it's well worth going to some meetups, because I know we can click via chatting on the Facebook group.
Yep.
But there's nothing quite like seeing somebody face to face.
No, that's very
And
true.
just having that little click that I've chatted to somebody online and then I've met them face to face, and oh my gosh, the connection was huge, that I never got just via the messaging. So it's definitely worth going to those meetups. Yeah.
It definitely is. Like some of the ones we've got coming up in Auckland, we're going to have, if they want to, from the upper North Island or anywhere around the North Island, we're going to have one at the beach.
Oh my gosh!
Being given a opportunity to use a batch, or I don't know what you guys call them over there, a holiday home. That'll be a better word. We can take tents. We're going to put them up on Saturday night and spend a lot of time barbecuing and going fishing, because it's not far from the beach. And yeah, it's going to be fun.
Oh my God, I so hope that I can come over one of those times when
we're planning to have more and more of them, because that's how essential they are to help us.
Yeah.
And that's what these groups should be about. They should be about helping to get on, to support, to move on, and to enjoy life.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely the key, because I do feel with some, they don't move on, they're stuck. And it's almost like they don't want to move on. I mean, it's almost like, you kind of you hear yourself question, is this when you're the happiest, when you're just moaning about where you are? Move on. Yeah. It's really important to move on. And I think it's also, if you've got a partner or a really close friend who's never been a JW, bring them along as well. Yeah. Because
absolutely.
They will learn so much, and they'll realise, okay, it's not just my friend being freaky, they're all freaky. Do you know what I mean? They'll realise actually, that JWs are just a freaky bunch. And it gives them an opportunity to find someone in that group that they can chat to, that they can ask questions of in a way that they perhaps aren't going to be asking their partner or their close friend.
Yep,
and it might also be some other partners of people there that have never been JWs that they can sit and talk to as well. Do you find this really freaky when your partner does blah, blah, or whatever it is? They've got that sort of, companionship there. I think it just is a great thing. And I really hope COVID lifts here, because I really miss those opportunities, because we can only have 6 at the moment. In some parts of the UK, you're not even allowed to have family members from outside of your home meet up with you at the moment. So, yeah, make the most of that. That's amazing.
Absolutely. Well, I really want to say thank you very much, Becky, for coming on, having a chat. Very courageous about some of the things you've told us.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you so much.
It's so nice to see the positive attitude that you have about how your life was and how it is now, and some of your future plans. And we look forward to seeing you in New Zealand one day. And we'll get some meetups planned for over here. If anybody wants to come to New Zealand, most months there's a meetup somewhere around the place. And we're hoping to even have one between Australia and New Zealand once our borders open.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Here in New Zealand, they've had a big one in Australia, but we want to have a big one here in New Zealand, so we'll be doing that as well. But what you've told us, your examples, absolutely wonderful.
That's really kind of you. Thank you so much. I'll keep you posted about how we're getting on with IGSA.
That'll be great.
Yeah, I also want to work with schools and stuff to try and educate schools about Jehovah's Witnesses and, childhood sexual abuse. So there's still lots to do and lots to get sort of stuck into. So, yeah, thank you so much for hearing me. And I'll tell you what's been brilliant. Shall I tell you what's been brilliant, although he has interrupted? Duncan's had to listen to me for this long without interrupting me. How cool is that? That's going down my positive thing for the day.
Well, I'm glad we were able to assist in that. You
Perfect.
can go and have a cup of tea before you guys start getting ready to close down for the night.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
But thank you once again.
So much.
And just so that everybody knows, Becky's one of our ones who are on the team for Dare to Drink. And in the next few weeks, we're going to have Becky on, not about her story, but about some helpful tips to help us move on, to be able to take the steps so that we can start to dare to drink. Because our only dream in the J-Dubs were paradise.
Yeah.
Or whatever else. So we want to be able to get rid of that garbage out of our head, because that's not life. So
No,
thank you once again. Thank you for all those who are on the live stream. Thank you for those who will listen to it later. But we really have appreciated everybody's time, and we look forward to seeing on the upcoming weekly events